Hi, everyone, and welcome to EduTALK. EduTALK is a virtual talk show created out of the need for a global learning community. And we focus on topics that directly impact Caribbean nations and Jamaican nationals working across the globe. EduTALK features teachers, principals, business leaders, dignitaries, and many other people who work in education, as well as who impact education either directly or indirectly. This month, we're featuring people because it's summer. We're looking at topics that our students could benefit from, as well as topics that are very important to us in education, and they actually impact the policy of moving our education system forward. I'm your host. I'm Dr. Dwayne Dice, and I'm joined by Mrs. Villeneuve-Dyce this evening. So welcome, Mrs. Dice, to EduTalk as usual.
Thank you, Dr. Dice. It's a pleasure to be here and to be
Yes,
hailing from the UK, actually, during this particular recording.
yes, indeed. Yeah, we're in the UK. We're spending a few weeks, sort of like enjoying the UK, but learning a few things from the educators here in the region. The two of the things that are popping up on our talks this month, there are two things. The affirmative action that is knocked down by the Supreme Court in New York, in the US, and then you have Jamaica moving towards divorcing the king. It was the queen, but divorcing the king now to becoming a republic. And we want to highlight some of the changes that are taking place in the minds of the people, as well as some of the concerns. So let's get started on this one. Let's look at the summer, and we usually talk about the summer slide with learning for our students. Based on your thinking in education, what are some of the things that you think students should be doing during the summer?
Well, a lot of our students are actually still recovering from the time that they were learning remotely during COVID. We haven't caught up academically in a lot of our students as far as the learning losses that took place at that time. I know when I was a student, one of the things that was very important for us is that we would have reading lists and we would have vocabulary lists and different academic activities that we would be given over the summer. And the requirement was that they be finished throughout the summer and that would be reviewed when school started. Now, this is an old fashioned tradition that I think a lot of parents shouldn't depend on schools to implement, but they themselves can actually implement at home in order to try to wade off some of the learning loss that takes place. Unfortunately, the way that the children's responded to the COVID and that time away has been emotionally traumatic for many of them. So a lot of schools don't want to take on the responsibility of adding too much work to students' list of things to do over the summer. But as parents, I think it's very important that we realize that our students, if they do not come back equipped with information that they've practiced over the summer, that they spend the first 2 or 3 months just catching up when school begins. And that is time lost and learning lost. So what do you think, Dr. Dice? You're in the classroom teaching math and science. Do you think those are good recommendations, or what additional recommendations would you have?
Yeah, I think those are very good, especially the words to understand vocabulary and how to apply them. I think we're losing some of that as we get through the summer, but even in the middle of the school year, that students are losing that. The other thing is to practice some math during the summer, to talk to their parents, as well as extended grandparents, extended family members, to get in touch with type of vocabulary words that they normally use in everyday life. The other thing that I would like to add to that too in the summer is to spend some time with extended family to learn about their culture and value systems. I think that's important too, and that will add to the level of educational attainment that they can achieve during the school year. So they get to wrap and relate to their family members' way of life, and that they can pass on some traditional values that they have, and some of the more important ones that they really need in everyday life. Yeah. So very good sharing with that in mind. One of the things that we want to focus on in the summer too, separate and apart from academic attainment and maintaining at the level uh, of savings, sort of like investment in education in the summer, but separate and apart from that and the value system is to make sure that they have good, clean fun in the summer so that they can have something to talk about when they go back to school. And you don't have to have money to have these. You can do board games. You can have decent conversations with people in your community, or if you're traveling from one place to the next, you can engage people in conversations. And even politics, you can talk to them very mildly about some of the political views that you don't understand, and just ask them to explain some of those views to you because you don't understand them. So that will get you in to a deeper level of engagement with community and political awareness too. All right, so speaking of political awareness, we have we look at the the affirmative action that the Supreme Court knocked down for Black and Brown people in America. This is a big deal for students, especially those who are trying very hard to get into Ivy League colleges, or even colleges in general, or schools that actually look on race as one of the most important components to get to balance the population of schools. And we have been talking, you're in policy in the DOE in New York City Department of Education. And this strikes home for me as a person of color, a brown person, Black and brown person, coming from the Caribbean, and realizing that in Florida, I remember getting my first job in Florida, and the principal looked at me when I signed the contract, and she said, "We really need to balance the Black people here, and I'm glad you're here." And so that really rocked me because I was thinking that it's based on my merit and it's based on my background, my academic and training in teachers college all the way up to a master's degree at the time. And so now I'm thinking, when I look back and heard in my mind what the principal said, that is based on my race also. That's why I got the job opportunity first and foremost. I'm thinking, if they knock this down in a racist country like America, what's gonna happen to people, people of color, Black students who are trying hard to get into Ivy League school, and they're thinking that it's all based on merit alone, then that's not true. It's really not true. It's politically not true for them. And I heard from the Harvard incoming president said that they're going to be maintaining their stance on diversity that is in their policy, that they're inviting or welcoming Black and brown kids all over the years passed by. So they're actually going against the Supreme Court's decision to base this only on merit, So based on all of that, what's your basic take on all of this that is happening in the news?
Well, there's so much to say on this topic, and unfortunately, the idea of merit and being a person of color has been considered mutually exclusive. They are not. They can be one and the same. And we have to understand that in a country, like you said, that has given a lot of race priority and preference to people who are not Black and brown, we have a situation where affirmative action was conceptualized because it realized that a lot of people who had not been given certain opportunities systemically for hundreds of years needed to have an opportunity now that we were conscious of that inequity, right? And try to rectify it. And so the idea that they're trying to admit students that are not qualified just because they happen to be Black or Brown students is a misnomer. It isn't the reason why they were being admitted. Now, for any of us who have attended Ivy League schools and highly selective universities, you realize that if you don't have what it takes to remain there, regardless of how wide the door was open, you will get put out. If you cannot
Mhm.
keep up with the work, if you don't have the intellectual capacity to be able to toe the line and to be able to excel in that academic environment, then it doesn't matter what color you are. They don't keep you because you're Black and brown. They keep you because you have demonstrated that academic aptitude and ability. So when you look at the definition of affirmative action, it specifically says um, a positive bias towards disadvantaged groups. So a lot of times we're summarizing that to be only Black and brown people, but that's actually not true as well. Affirmative action benefited people in the LGBT community. It benefited people who were females, as well as people of other nationalities outside of traditionally Caucasian ethnicities. So this is a concept that actually spanned a large group of people and benefited a number of people. So we're going to now not having affirmative action. We can slide back into a situation where it's very monolithic, where you only see one priority or on who's being selected in any area. That could be places that are universities that don't want to admit um, people that are white, for example, that it could
Mhm.
reverse. Whereas
Mhm.
they were making a point to include them before, they may not at this point. And so you're going to have very biased selection where people have that mentality. But I love the fact that you brought up the example of Harvard. Harvard refuses to move in that direction, not only because they've seen the benefit of having a diverse population, and so many students of various ethnicities have been successful having gone through that rigorous program and demonstrated their aptitude. So they've already been convinced that this is a policy that is beneficial to the university. So we can only hope that that will continue in a number of areas, but it is hopeful.
Yeah, yeah. It really speaks of the culture, the deep-rooted culture of the US, though. Starting with the Constitution and this race bias, it's constantly having this idea of race bias instead of choosing other things to be prejudicial about. So they constantly just stroke, and playing with this idea of race and race relations and the discrepancies between the races in America. It's a lot of things that are totally based on race. And what grieves me a little bit is when people in general look at the idea of the society that we're living in and thinking that a lot of things not based on race, when in fact it is. And the policies that they are putting in place in the schools, they're race-based policies. And it could benefit, as you said, they could benefit one set of people, and disregard the benefits of others, or the I don't even know how to put it, but to open access, basically, to cause people not to have access and to cause other people to have access at one point or another in the society. It's very important that we pay attention to all of those things that are at play and see when they occur for the negatives, and see if we can stop it in its track before it gets even worse. So let's say it may be leading towards a positive where they show merit, where people are elevated based on merit and not so based on the color of their skin so much. Let's hope. All right, the other section of our talk is Jamaica leaning towards, journeying towards becoming a republic. And I coined this phrase over the past week to say that Jamaica is divorcing the king, because the queen is gone, no longer with God. God rest her soul. But the king no. What we have interviewed quite a bit of people on this program about Jamaica leaning towards becoming a republic. And so one more time, we're talking about this and getting perspective because it's difficult to write a constitution. It's very, very difficult to put certain things in place that are very general, but at the same time, embrace the values that will really stand the test of time. So based on policy, what is your take on this idea of enough is enough? We need to get rid of the governor general.
Well, I mean, we have history to look to. We know that the place that Jamaica had in English history was one, like many colonized countries, that was specifically earmarked for resources, for the economic benefit of the monarch, right? And so when we have that kind of a situation and that kind of a history in present day, we realize that there have been, of course, drawbacks to being in that position. But we have the opportunity now, with all of the number of Jamaicans in particular that have been educated all over the world, and the access to international information and global news, we know that we can do better. We have seen other countries that have done better. You had given me some examples in the Caribbean, of Caribbean countries that have become republics and standing on their own two feet. And it might not happen right away that you have the level of autonomy and financial prosperity that you would hope for. But if you think back to American history, and when they started, they were completely impoverished. When they started their road to independence, which we actually just celebrated July 4th, independence from England, it took some time for them to get their footing. They did have the economic system of slavery, obviously, to fall back on as far as financing goes. But the fact remains that as soon as we, as a country, start to think about how can we put our feet firmly on the ground in the current economy, in the current international opportunities that we have, right, to be able to reinvent ourselves, then we won't be as terrified of the idea of striking that independence. And a lot of our nationals in Jamaica are very concerned about the idea of not being connected to England, having been connected to England for so long, even regardless of the fact that England makes it very hard for our Jamaican nationals even to visit the UK. We know how expensive it is and how many people are turned away who even want to come and visit. But yet we still want that relationship, because even an unhealthy or an abusive relationship that you're familiar with is more comforting than one you're not familiar with, right? So that's one of the things that we have to deal with as a nation psychologically, is how can we feel confident enough to become independent? And then what does reinventing ourselves look like? What does a Jamaican national by themselves, without that impediment of being associated with this other nation? What does that look like? And that's what we need to explore. And I think it's a very exciting time for those who are willing to embrace it.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with that. Looking at, and I'm hoping that people are looking at the formation of the U.S., because they brought up a very good point with that, to look at the journey of the U.S. Throughout their constitution. They didn't get everything like the northern people who were debating and creating the constitution. They didn't get anything that they wanted. They kept slavery in the constitution. They actually did not regard Black people as fully human. But they got a nation in the long and short of it. They got a nation, and then it was up to the white people who created it, including Thomas Jefferson and Washington and everybody else, that they were supposed to create a nation where they claim that all people were created equal, and then just fix the whole thing. But they did create a nation and the nation became a superpower in the world. And honestly, with Jamaica and the stance that Jamaica has in the world right now, with reggae music and the sprinting of the track and field people, and also one of the tourist capitals of the Western Hemisphere, we can do a lot. One of the things that Jamaica also needs to take into consideration too, as a journey towards being very independent and a republic, is the agricultural potential of the land. That if you drop a seed very carelessly behind you, the actual thing grows without you putting soil over it. The seed actually grows. So that's one of the things that they need to look at also, is to see that agriculture becomes a bedrock of the country. And where they have black, green, and gold, where the black could not, it could change from referencing hardship and struggle to empowerment and rebirth, and also agricultural sustainability. That black power there could be those things instead of just struggle. And they need to, rewind and come again, and treat it as black excellence. So what exactly are we looking? So when we look at the Constitution and we look at the rewriting of the Constitution and so on, what are some of the components that you think as a policymaker could stand, when you look at policy and some of these, what they refer to as the rights of people and the amendments that would go into this constitution, what are some of the areas that you think would stand the test of time, that they wouldn't have to do a lot of modifications for these, just off the top of your head?
Well, I mean, I wish I knew a little better the detail of what's currently in place in Jamaica. Unfortunately, that's not my area of expertise, but I do know we don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's certain basic rights that we want to be able to make sure that people have, and goals for the country, for their prosperity, economics being at the center of that constitution, as is the economics in the US Constitution. It's a matter of putting a priority on the ownership of property and making room for there being ownership of property for the average person, so that there isn't as much poverty, that people can, in fact, use land that they have available to them, so that they don't have to undergo so much starvation, and lack of food. This is something that, as you said, should not be happening in a place that is so fertile. When I think of the black and the black, yellow, and green, I think of the fertility of the soil. Like there's some really, really fertile black soil in like St. Elizabeth that I've seen that I found absolutely beautiful, and the green being the lush, that you have in so many places,
And
that
and
grows
that's
out
what
of the
it is in
soil.
Jamaica. That's what
Yeah,
it is.
that's exactly what it is, and all
The
that's
land
done.
of wood and
To me,
water.
that's the goal. Yep.
Mhm.
So this is who we are in a very beautiful way. I don't have any problem acknowledging struggle. I think struggle for me gets us to where we need to be. Without struggle, there can be no appreciation. When everything goes well, we tend to think that that's the standard. So I can acknowledge the struggle that we have had in order to get to where we are, but that's not where we need to stay. So it's an acknowledging, and I think the Constitution should map out for us those priorities, for which we will not fall below. Those certain putting our people first, putting health care first, making sure that people have the level of economic security that they need, being able to direct the money in a way that provides for that kind of socioeconomic stability that they need, an investment in, you and I've talked about this a lot, into manufacturing. So
Mhm.
many former third world countries, or I think that's not what they're calling them now, developing countries, um, actually have been able to reinvent themselves through manufacturing.
Mhm.
India and China is an excellent example of that, how that can be. Now, There have been abuses there. A lot of child labor laws have been violated. That's not what we need to, we don't need to imitate those things that are negative. But what we have can learn from other nations that is positive, that we can put in place, that's definitely what I would recommend. That we
Mhm.
take on those attributes that make us the ideal version of ourselves, and then work towards maintaining that ideal, right? Because that's going to be a struggle in itself, just to try to achieve those ideal goals. But you have to at least have the ideals in place. And that's what our Constitution should be based on, those ideals that we want to constantly try to achieve.
Yeah, yeah. It points to the sustainable goals of the United Nations that Jamaica should become a place to live and work and live happily ever after, like Shrek and Fiona in their song. But we can do that in terms of what policies we write and what constitutional development, what it will look like over the long haul for the country. I'm sure Prime Minister Andrew Holness is looking into some things like these that they should put in there, some principles that we live by. We love talking about principles in Jamaica a lot and values, but some of those things that will last, we really have to look on those that become our um, unalienable rights, as they're referred to in the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence for the US. So we touch on three different areas here. The summer swing for students, summer slide, I call it swing, because I want to nickname it something else. And then we look at the affirmative action that is not done by the Supreme Court in the United States, and also we look at the Jamaican Republic um, um, journey moving towards a republic. It's high time that we start having conversations with everybody right across the island of Jamaica. I think we didn't even mention this, that maybe we could take something out of Barbados playbook, because they actually divorced the queen before she died long time ago, uh, and then starting to look at their constitutional journey to writing a constitution for their country, their island. I think we can take a page or maybe take the whole book from Barbados. Um, what do you want to say to students though, in terms of these three areas that we look at? We're referring to college students, because upper high school students trying to get into colleges, even in the US or elsewhere, and they're thinking, man, I didn't know affirmative action existed. What am I going to do now? Should I freak out, or should I continue my journey and hope and pray to God that these people let me in, not based on my race, but based on my merit, my academic merit, because I worked hard for this? Or also students across the Caribbean or in Jamaica looking at the Constitution and how they can contribute to this way of life of the Constitution. Um, what do you want to say to these students, who are engaged in societal informational change?
So one of the things I want to say, and I think I find a lot of personal pride in this, is that people of African descent that have been distributed all over the world have been existing and creating families, learning, making their mark in the world internationally long before affirmative action was ever even in place. We have a long legacy of success despite the world economy being based on global slavery at one point. We have made such a remarkable impact in so many nations that I think it's very important to understand that we are, if not anything else, one of the most resilient communities of people that have been scattered all over the world. And we need to remember that. We need to remember that we'll exist before, after affirmative action, and all of the other different policies that come and go, because we have an intention in mind to thrive as a people, as a nation, and we need to continue to do so. So don't for even a moment think of it as something that is a setback. something that'll hold you back in any way possible. Because one thing that we've come to realize is that the world economy is based on what do you know, what can you offer to make money? And so that idea that merit is now something that is a priority, that the skills that you have will be a priority and give you those opportunities is still very much true. Somebody going out of their way to exclude somebody who's highly effective and highly capable because of their nationality isn't the type of organization you want to work with anyway. So you
Mhm.
want to find that out as soon as possible in order to avoid those places as far as employment goes. But keep in mind, this is a moment in time where you can be an entrepreneur easier than anybody could have ever done in the past. So instead of just looking to see who's going to accept you, niche out your place in the world by creating or thinking about how you can create a space for yourself, how you can earn money through your own skills. So focus on learning, focus on understanding the world, not just your little country, but literally the world
Corner.
economy.
Mhm.
Yes, and understand or come to develop the skills necessary for you to be able to go anywhere in the world and be successful. So
Yeah.
that's what I would definitely recommend students in high school or moving into college to be very strategic about what they're learning and about the skills that they're developing, because those are the ones that they're going to fall back on ultimately. And those are the ones that the world needs. We're not just little nations anymore. We're a global society, regardless of where we live. And you have to keep that in mind when you're developing who you are. And that means your intellectual self and your economic viability. So I'm wishing everybody the best of luck. There's a lot of information out there. Don't look to school to be the only place to get it. As Dr. Dice said earlier, go to your family, gain that wisdom where you can, family, friends, mentors, teachers, and just go to the library and read all the wisdom that is actually in books, either online or in physical spaces, right? Engage your mind in learning and you will always benefit from that experience.
Yeah, yeah. They're very good. Very good. You summed it up really well there. I want to thank you so much for coming on EduTalk this week and share your expertise on these areas. Are just talking, because we're EduTalk people. We're talking about these issues so you can become more educated about these or become more socially aware, which is education about them. And so thank you so much, Julie, for being on this week. And guys, you can go back to our channel, our YouTube channel, and check out the other episodes that we have had over the years for EduTalk. It will actually give you some information to chew on as you go through this summer. Have a wonderful week, everybody, and we'll see you next week with another edition of EduTalk. Take care, everybody, and peace. Peace be with you. Bye. Bye, everyone. Take care.